Hello, friends. Welcome to Coding Garden with CJ. Welcome to a stream where we are going to be writing more C# code. So if you tuned in last week, we started on a .NET app. Let's look at it on GitHub. Well, what's up, everybody? Yes, if you go to my GitHub, click on this repo, this is the app that we set up last week. We spent quite a bit of time just on setup in general, getting the app up and going. We got a database set up, we got models, we got authentication going, and I think today we're really just going to focus on the CRUD piece, create, read, update, delete. And we did decide last time that we are CRUDing recipes, so we're basically making a recipe API. But you can check out the code here. And let's say hello to everybody, and thank everybody for all the supports. Thank you all for that hype train. Future Flash says, C# is my absolute favorite. It really means a lot to me. I watch your JavaScript videos all the time, and I'm glad to see you expanding. Nice. Well, thanks for being here. Got lots of follows and stuff, but Coding Garden fan, thank you for that 2-month resub. Thanks for the host, Mr. Demon Wolf. Hope you're doing all right. Fight with the 14-month Prime resub. The Art of Missy with 4 months. Blank with the 8-month resub. And Bite Push Array with the 11-month resub. Thank you all for your support. Yeah, it's Friday. No worries, Chief Mustardo. Thanks for dropping by. Speaking of drops, let's all play the drop game. Type !drop me in the chat, and your avatar will fall from the sky. Nice. Yeah, so we're not using Blazor in this. We're just building a web API. I think eventually I'll explore Blazor. But yeah, let's say hello to all the first timers. There's quite a few of you. What's up, Ale Puddin? Welcome to the Coding Garden, and Grilled Cheese, and Geek Label, and Wasso, and Mr. Saiyan, and Chime, and Adrian, and Tequila Tobs, and Umater. Welcome to the Coding Garden. Glad to have you here. Thanks for sending a message. Yeah, the drop game is literally just this. So basically, I think there's a timeout on it. Every now and then you can type !drop followed by an emoji or me. It'll fall from the sky, and if it lands in the garden, you'll get your name on the screen, just like Card House and Eddie and BK7. Yeah, I honestly, I think we're just gonna jump right into it because we have some code to write. And thank you, Forsake No One. Thank you for that sub, much appreciated. I'll give you. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna do a quick review of all the stuff that we wrote last time, and then we're just gonna jump in and start building some API routes. So, this is our .NET API. If you look at the README on GitHub. Like I mentioned earlier, it has links to all of the articles we followed to get this stuff set up. We are using a Microsoft SQL server as our database, and that is running in a Docker container. So in the app here, we just have this Docker compose that spins up a MSSQL server, and that's what we're connecting to. We're using Entity Framework, which is an ORM, an object relational mapper. And we essentially did this code first. So what we did was we defined some C# classes that correspond to our database tables. So we have a base model, which just has the common things that every database table will have. It has an ID and some timestamps on it. And then our models inherited from that. So we have a user model, which inherits from the base model. And then a user has a username and a password, and we also have some validation attributes on there. And then we also have the recipe class, because we are building an API for recipes. And so this has various properties like title, content, image, and then the creator, the person that actually created the recipe. So what we did is we just created these classes, and then we ran a command. I don't know if I remember what the command was. It was like .NET EF. Yeah, this. So when we ran this command, it basically was able to look at those models that we created and generate some migrations. These migrations here can be run against the database to actually create those database tables. So we actually haven't written any SQL code. All of it is automatically generated for us. So these migrations were generated. We now have a database, and I believe we can connect to it if our connection is still there. Yeah, and so we have this recipe app database, and then we have those two tables, recipes and users, and all of that was automatically generated for us using the Entity Framework. Yeah. Somebody asked thoughts on EF. I really like it. It's one of the best ORMs I've ever worked with, like in any language or environment. I like it a lot. If something like it existed in the JavaScript world, I would use it. There are things that are close to it, but it's really good. Tech Turner asks, is C# similar to C and C++? It's similar in that it is a compiled language, and it's similar in that it has C-style syntax, just like JavaScript. So JavaScript, Java, C#, C++, all of these languages have C-style syntax. So when you look at it, you see lots of curly braces, and the syntax looks kind of similar. But C and C++ are much lower level. So we talked about last time how the C# runs on the .NET Framework. So the .NET Framework is an actual runtime that you have to install on any machine that you want to run this code on. And so whenever you compile a C# app, it actually doesn't get compiled into native code like it would with C or C++. It gets compiled into an intermediate language, and then that intermediate language can be put on any system that has the runtime installed, and then it can run. But the syntax, I would say, is similar, and you can do low-level stuff if you want to. It is possible to like get down to the level of actually like allocating memory and stuff like that, but you don't have to because it is a garbage collected language. So yeah, I would say if you already know C and C++, you probably can definitely pick up C#, but some things are going to be much higher level than you're used to, likely. Yeah, we probably need to do this, Bob, and maybe this would be a good example of showing how new migrations would work, because right now our recipe just has content. So I was thinking that it would just be markdown, and you could put like the list of ingredients as a list, like a markdown list, but if we want to filter recipes by ingredient, that would be really hard to do if it was just in the content field. So yeah, I mean, we would likely need a separate database table because this would be like a one-to-many relationship. One recipe can have many ingredients, and that's going to complicate things. So I don't think I'm going to do it just because it gets more complicated. But if this were a legit recipe app, you would probably want to do that. Yeah. Technically, yeah, you can use pointers in C#, but most people don't, I would say, because you don't have to. Okay. So, yeah, look, Elite Geek said exactly what I just said. You can use them, but you don't have to. Okay, so we have those models that generated the database, and then we get into the actual API stuff. So if you take a look at our startup file, this sets everything up. And what's nice about this is that we have Swagger documentation being automatically generated for us. So we had to do some Swagger setup to tell it about our authentication scheme, and like how we do token validation. But once we set all of that up, we now have a fully automatically generated Swagger documentation. So this gets generated for all of our API routes. And you can see that we have a login route. We have a route to create users, get users. And then we have this weather forecast thing, which was generated in the app. But we'll get rid of that and create our own now. And the way that those are set up are with controllers. So if we look at our controllers, we have, for example, the Auth Controller. This would be similar to like a router in Java, in like Node and Express. But essentially, you create a class, you inherit from the controller base, and then any methods you have on this class, you can map them to be HTTP routes. So basically, this function here is the request handler for the login route. So whenever a post request comes in here, this is the code that's running for that. And it's just your standard login. Look up the user in the database, validate that their password was correct, and then respond with a token if everything was good. And we can look at that weather forecast controller. It just has one route, the get, which just generates a random array of weather forecast stuff. Yeah. Let's take a quick stretch and catch up on some things. Yeah, Denolium says that's cool, and I agree. It's pretty cool. All the automated generated stuff is pretty sweet. Oh yeah, somebody asked which one we're using. We are using .NET 5, which I believe they are no longer calling .NET Core, but this .NET 5 is the thing that came out after .NET Core 3.1. So yeah, that's a thing. .NET 5. Though technically, I'm pretty sure all of the code we've written would still work with .NET 3.1. I don't think we're doing anything special. And the database we're using is Microsoft SQL Server. Okay, I think we should just go ahead and create some routes. So basically, we want to create a recipes controller, and that recipes controller is going to have 4 routes. It's going to have a post route to create a recipe, a get route to get a single recipe, a get route to get all the recipes, and a put route to update an existing recipe. So let's do it. We're going to create a new file. We're just going to call this recipes controller. Oh, and delete. Yeah, we'll have delete too. So I guess five methods. I'm going to copy some code from over here because it's going to be similar, but then we will go from there. So this will be the recipes controller. And then for now, let's just do a get route. So we actually don't have any recipes in our database, but we can create a get route that we should at least see an empty array as the response. So we need a method, and then we need an attribute like this. So it's going to look similar to this. But this is going to be, we're just going to say HTTP get, and we're not going to specify the route. So this automatically should map to the root of the recipes controller. And then this will be a, it's going to be an async method because we need to talk to our database. We're just going to call this method get, and it doesn't take in any parameters because this is just list all. But this will return, we'll say, a list of recipes. And in this case, I can just do an IEnumerable because this is an interface that lists and I think arrays implement as well. So we'll bring in recipe like that. So the recipe class is defined in our models namespace. So I have access to that here. And then this thing just needs to return something. For now, let's just see it working. We'll do an OK result with a list of recipe. It's just an empty list. So we're not even querying the database. We're literally just going to be returning an empty list. And let's see if this works. So I save this. Right now, it should have picked up the change. And I don't think it did. So I'm actually going to kill this. And then .NET watch run is supposed to pick up changes and automatically recompile. And that is something to note. When you're writing C# code, you do need to rebuild it anytime your code changes. So now that we've added that, look at this. We automatically have this recipes endpoint. And if what's also cool about this is, so because I defined this as a method that returns think of this as a list of recipe, you can see the Swagger documentation gives us an example of what we'll actually get back, because it can infer that from this type. So it's like, hey, this is an example of what you'll get back. We can try it out, and we get back an empty array, just like we expected. Yeah, so I wouldn't necessarily call it a hot refresh, but it's basically when the files change, recompile and restart the app. That's what it does. Yeah. Yeah, we're just doing .NET for fun. I've talked about doing other things that aren't JavaScript for a very long time, so. Am I going to implement a repository pattern? I didn't plan on it. I think here's what I'll do. I'll do it just straight up in the controller file, and then we can talk about how we can refactor it into like the repository pattern or something like that. But for now, I'm just going to put everything in the controller. And we'll go from there. Yes, I see here. Coding 20 minutes into the stream. We need to get stuff done. We can't waste any time here. Yeah. And this will be uploaded to YouTube, but I will mention you can access all of the recent VODs on Twitch. So if you go to twitch.tv/codinggarden/videos, you can see last stream right here, and click on that. And that's where we set up the project. And then you can see today's stream right there. So when this is all over, feel free to watch it and stuff. Yeah. And what's up, LOL McGain? Thanks for being here. Welcome to the Coding Garden. It returns the user password. What? No? So, I mean, last time we did get in the weeds a bit about different things, but basically for our user routes, we actually implemented a user DTO, user data transfer object, because the user DTO does not have a password property on it. So whenever you list users, we don't want to see what their passwords are. So essentially we map the results from the database, or we project them into a DTO object that does not have a password property. I'm doing good, Harry. Thank you for asking. What's up, Ryan? Yeah, to do. Fix it later. I have not seen Astro Build. What is Astro Build? Oh, I think I saw a Fireship video on it. Yeah. Yeah, and welcome, Invisible Programmer. In the recipe example, oh, good call sites here. Good call, good call. Yeah, I see what you're saying. Let's look at our recipe route, and I'll show you why that's happening, and we can figure out how to fix it. But yes, so like if a recipe will have a creator ID. And right now our model has a creator on it. But we need to in this case we need to create a DTO object, because we need to create a class that defines what we're sending back, but doesn't include the user's password in the response, because we do want to have like the creator embedded, so that way we have like user info. Think about if we're building like a UI around this, we would want to show their profile image and stuff like that. Yeah. Less statique. You're right. There is JSON ignore. I don't know if that is supported, because I don't think we set up Newtonsoft JSON, but we could try that. So let's look at this. So in our user model, I think there is a JSON ignore attribute on password. Let's see what happens if we add that. I think the only issue here is now for the route that accepts the user as a payload, it's not going to have the password on there, but let's see. I think it restarted. Yeah, so JSON ignore technically got rid of it. However, whenever we're logging in, we do want to pass the password in. So I mean, technically for login, we should actually create like a different DTO object, like a credentials object. Yeah. Regardless, let's actually get the create route working, so that way we can actually see something in the response, and then we can figure out what's happening here with the creator and stuff like that. Yeah, DTO request, DTO response. Yeah. And last time people were telling me about AutoMapper, but we never actually set it up. I'll show you what we did in the users controller. We just basically did a select. So, I mean, and this is basically what AutoMapper does. So query the users table, and then select as like map, basically map that into a user DTO, which does not have a password property. And people were telling me that AutoMapper basically does this automatically. You just say map from this to this. We didn't set that up though. I'm not worried about that right now though. Yeah, there's like a project. Let's create some recipes, and then we'll figure out all the nuances of it all. Okay. And actually, I'll go ahead and write the actual database query to do this. So an interesting note here is we actually have dependency injection. So let me show you how that works. So in this recipes controller, and so if you've been watching from the beginning, you kind of saw I just created this file, and then it automatically picked it up, right? It automatically detected it and added it to my Swagger documentation. And behind the scenes, it's actually creating an instance of this controller file. But we can do something like this. where we create a constructor, and we say in that constructor, we want access to the recipes context. And the recipes context is basically our interface into the database, right? It has the list of users, the list of recipes, and this is how we can query the database. But by simply putting this as an argument, a parameter to my constructor, I will now automatically get that context. It's going to be dependency injected. I have declared a dependency on it, and it will later inject it so that I can use it. And so like right here, I could say something like recipes equals context dot recipes dot to list async. And so that's basically like select star from recipes. And that gives us back a recipes list, and then we just do an OK response with that. So in this case, we still should get an empty array, but it's actually querying the database to get that empty array now. So if we try it, yeah, empty array. All right, now let's create a post route so that way we can actually create some recipes. So we'll do an HTTP post. And what's up, TD Racing? I'm doing pretty good. And so this will be a post, and the result will be an actual created recipe. So the result is not a list of recipes, it's just a recipe that was created. And then the request body will be the recipe that we're trying to create. And for now, let's just respond with it. So we're going to send a recipe to our API, and that API is just going to respond right back with the recipe that we sent it. It's not putting it into the database yet. So you can see now we have this post route on recipes. And again, because we specified that the payload should be a recipe type, it's got some nice documentation. And then when I go to try it out, you can see it's all pre-populated. Let's try. We're going to make a grilled cheese recipe. Get 2 pieces of bread, put cheese in between, grill it. This is our recipe. We won't have an image for now. And one thing we do need to set up is to automatically set the creator. Because basically, I shouldn't be able to send a post request unless I'm logged in, and the creator should be the logged in user. Our recipe will get way more complicated. This is just an example. But for now, the creator ID really just needs to be my user ID. So let me log in really quick to get my user ID. What's up, Chad? Well, I actually have no idea what my user ID is. I feel like technically I should respond with my user object in my auth payload. It's fine. A lot of things need to happen here. But I can make a request to get all users now that I have a token. And we can see what my user ID is. So it's user ID 1. It's the first user in the system. So let's just see what happens if I do something like this. This is not going to put it into the database. This is basically just going to send it to the API and respond back exactly with what we sent it. Let's go. And it worked. But you'll notice that it added a bunch of properties. Because basically what it does is it takes in that JSON payload, and it actually needs to deserialize it into a recipe object. And if we look at the recipe object, it has a lot of properties, right? All these properties, and also these properties have validations on them. And it creates that, and then that's what we're responding with. But because like title is required, if I were to remove that, we actually would get some automatic validation, because when it tries to turn it into that recipe class, because we specified title as required, if I try to do this, yeah, we actually get a validation error. The title field is required. So this is great. Like all of this is automatic because our model class has these validation things on them. Cool. Yeah, I'll need to set up basically a middleware that after validating the token puts it onto the request. I do need to set that up. Yeah, and I think I'm gonna have to set that up before I actually get the create route working. But yeah, what's up? She loves BKM. Welcome first stream. All right, let's take a quick stretch. So so One Punch Mac is asking, is the context part of the entity framework? It is. So if we look at the context, it inherits from the base context, which comes from the entity framework. That's in our data folder. Yeah. So DB context comes from entity framework core, entity framework core in this case. What's up, Nikki Poo? Okay. Now, this is the point where we got to do some work which isn't directly related to recipes. Because what I want to be able to do is, for this recipe that I receive into the API, I want to automatically set that creator ID. And the other thing is, I want to make sure that users are logged in when they create recipes. So I'm actually just going to add this Authorized attribute. And now you can only make a post request here if you have a valid token in the request. Now, how do we set up getting our user added to our request? Now, I know there's some stuff in here that actually does the JSON Web Token validation. Like this, we have our token validation, but we actually need some sort of middleware-like thing, which is going to, after validating it, setting the user on the request. And I don't know how to do that, so I need to look it up. Validate middleware request user. Now, I did say last time that we would attempt to set up the identity framework, which would do a lot of that for us. But I'll be honest, I don't want to. I don't want to spend the time setting it up. So let's just see if we can find some resources on like how to get that user set on the request. Yeah, so we're already creating tokens. We're already validating tokens. Looks like this is a JSON Web Token middleware that actually looks up the user after validating the token. Let's see how they use that. Yeah, this kind of looks like what we need. So this is a custom authorized attribute. So you saw me add this just now. Basically what we can do is we can create our own class that implements a method which can do something with the JSON Web Token payload when it is being authorized. This might be what we need. Yeah. On successful validation, the middleware retrieves the user and assigns it to context.items user. So I think this is what we need, because this is the thing that's actually looking up, I mean, this user service.get by ID, you could imagine that this is looking up the user in the database after the token has been validated. Because we have our token validation right here. Caleb says it feels so weird to watch this. Do you have any suggestions though, Caleb? Like, is this what I need to actually get the user from the token onto the context so I can use it in the route? Or is there a better or easier way? Because I'm not sure how that how this JWT middleware is really even being used. Do they just define it and then it automatically overwrites it? Omit the login route in the middleware? What do you mean by that? I think this is what we need. I'm gonna look at some other stuff just to see what people are doing. Yeah, so this uses the identity framework or identity platform, which we are not using. There's a use middleware method in config. Okay. Which means like over here, we could do something like use middleware. Interesting. And then that use middleware would happen. I need it to be after the authorized attribute because I need it. I don't think I want to validate the token manually. Right, because the token validation happens automatically here. Yeah, I think, and so what Tiago is asking, like, why does this just work? C# actually does have the ability to override classes and methods that are in some other namespace. And that's basically what we're doing here, because you can see that we're in the Web API Authorization JWT middleware namespace, and essentially the code that we write here overrides any of the existing code that would have already been there, so we can do custom stuff. Look for claims identity? Well, we never actually used identity platform. Let's look at it. I'm gonna look, are we already using JWT middleware? Because if we are, then it would make sense to overwrite it. There's an article about middleware. Let's take a look. Middleware is generally encapsulated in a class and exposed with an extension method. Okay. We have this middleware. Oh, I see. I see. This is a middleware that they're writing, and then you register it with use middleware. Okay. Yeah, I guess the only thing is, like, this is manually validating the token, whereas I have something that is already validating the token for me. So I just need to make sure that the middleware that I register has already validated the token. But let's try it. Let's just create this middleware because we will need to do something like this. Let's do it. We're going to create a folder for middlewares. And then we'll create a file. I guess we can call this JWT middleware. That's fine. I'm just going to copy what they have, and we're going to heavily modify it. Now, I don't think I need to put this in this namespace. I'm actually just going to put this in recipe app.middleware's namespace. And then this is the JWT middleware. Now, they are dependency injecting the application settings because that's what they're using to validate the token. I'm just hoping we can register this middleware after the token has already been validated. If not, then we'll have to add some manual stuff. And then if we saw in this example, they had, oh, actually, we do need next. We do need next. And I think that's a very similar concept to like in Node and Express. where after one middleware is done running, it calls next so that the next middleware can run. And so this is the JWT middleware constructor. It takes in next. Great. And then when it gets invoked, let's just see what we get. Here's what I'm going to do. I'm actually just going to set a breakpoint and then interactively debug this thing. So when it gets invoked, we'll have access to the context. We can look at the context. And this is what I'm thinking, Abu, is we basically, after use authentication, use authorization, here we do use middleware. And we pass in our JWT middleware. Like this. But we do need to use the middleware namespace that we created. So in VS Code, if you do command period or control period, you can get some suggestions, but we need to use that namespace, and that automatically brings in the using, so that way we have access to this. All right. Let's see what happens. Do it before authorization, but after authentication. I'm curious what authorization is even doing for us then. Because technically, like, this is what we're doing. This is what I want to do with this middleware, is I want to authorize, and we're not necessarily authorizing the request. We are putting the user object onto the context is what we're doing. Yeah. Okay, so let's just see what we got. So I'm actually going to kill this in my terminal, like that. And then I have a breakpoint set right here, so we'll be able to inspect the context. And then I should be able to just launch it within VS Code. And then when that breakpoint gets hit, we can inspect it. Like it did just now. So if we look at the context, it has a lot of stuff. Oh, does it already have the user? Yeah, right now the user appears to be no. I don't know. We'll just let this happen. Okay, and then we'll inspect it whenever I send an unauthorized request. So from here, right now I haven't set my token. Actually, let's set my token. Let's get a token. I know I don't need to do it manually, but I am not using the identity platform. And if I'm not using the identity platform, then I might need to do it manually. Not super test, super secret. Cool. Context.user.claims. It's automatic. All right, let's try it. Let's try it. And we won't register this middleware anymore, but in the recipes route, we can try accessing HTTP context.user. Though I do need, I'm telling you, I do need to do something, because right now our token validation isn't looking up the user in the database. Our token technically does have the user ID on it, and that might actually be all we need. But let's see what we actually have access to. So over here, what you're telling me is HTTP context.user with a capital U. This will potentially have the user ID on it because we do have the authorized attribute. I think that's what you all are telling me. Yeah. Okay. Let's see what happens. And this time I'm not gonna. Well, yeah, I do want an interactive debug. CS it stands for C#. So just like JS, we call our files .js, it's JavaScript. CS is C#. CJ stands for CJ. Okay, so we have a token. And then now we're going to set our token and attempt to create a recipe. Here we are. So if we look at context.user, we have some claims. Ah, there they are. Yeah. So these are the claims that were in the token. And really, we could just do claims. We could find the ID claim, because that's all we need. And we use that to set the creator ID on the recipe. Okay. Yeah. Is there an easy way to get the claim by name, or am I gonna have to like iterate through this list and find the one where the key is ID? Huh. Yeah, and FSociety is asking, can I explain what is validate user and validate audience in the JSON web token? Are you talking about here? It's validate issuer. So when we generate a JSON web token has an issuer and an audience inside of it. And actually, I can show you with the one that we just created from login. So jwt.io has this nice little debugger. You can plug in a token, and it'll show you all the info that's inside of it. So right now, our issuer is localhost 5001, and our audience is localhost 5001. Now, you can technically set these to be anything. Like, when this app gets deployed and it's in production, the issuer will likely be the URL of where it's deployed. But those two properties here say that when you're validating a token, not only are you validating that it was signed with the right secret, you're also validating that once you decode it, the issuer and the audience are the correct values as well. Yeah. Regardless, I think we are on our way. And actually, we're going to have to create some DTOs. Here's what I'm thinking. So we need a recipe DTO, and that's like for creating or updating a recipe. Actually, did we call this user DTO? We did. I'm actually going to update the file name. So this is going to be our recipe DTO. And if we look at our model class, we can just grab all of the properties we want except for the ones we don't want to be able to specify in the request or the update. And basically, it's just these. It's image, title, and content, because I don't want you to be able to specify the creator in the request, because the creator gets automatically set. So for our DTO, this is it. A DTO is a data transfer object. Basically, it's like a subversion of a model. So you can see that this is basically just like the model, but it's missing a few properties, because when a request comes into my server, I don't want the person requesting to send the creator ID, because the creator ID is going to get automatically set. So the DTO is basically only the properties that you're going to accept during a data transfer, whether that's receiving it or sending it. In this case, this is used for receiving it into my app. Now, like in Express, we don't, or like in JavaScript, we don't really think about this because our objects are all dynamic. Like we can just leave properties off of objects and things will work just fine. But because everything is statically typed here, I basically need a version of my object that doesn't have those properties on it. Yeah. Okay. That's fine. And so now in our controller, we're actually going to be accepting a recipe DTO. Or respond. Yeah, well, actually, we're going to respond with a recipe, but we accept a recipe DTO, like that. And then we'll need to create an actual recipe using that DTO and insert it into the database. So I'll say the let's call this the recipe request. Yeah, I mean, and you don't technically need one for every object, but when you have scenarios like this where you need to omit properties or you only want certain things or you need some things to be set automatically, you would create a DTO. Like the example of our DTO for user last time was the fact that when we send back a user response, we don't want to include the password. Yeah, and Fuzzy Life is saying, technically, I should have a whole bunch of DTOs. Because basically everything coming from the database, I do need to hide a lot of stuff. So like in the example of, let's say a user, we're requesting use all the users from our system. We don't want to respond with their passwords. So we map all of the users from our database into this object, which doesn't have a password property. So a similar thing. But here's what I need to do. I need to create a new recipe. And I need to set all of its properties based on this recipe request. People talked about AutoMapper. I could potentially use that. We're just going to do it manually so we can see it happening. But for example, like the title should be recipe request.title. And then we have the content and the image URL. I think those are the main properties, right? Yeah, title, content, and image URL. But then here is where we can actually set the creator ID. And we don't want the creator ID to be set by the request because we're going to use the thing that was in the actual context. This is the actual user that's logged in. And Ryan's saying, how many subscribers do I need to quit working and stream full time? I mean, if I wanted to match my salary, it would be a lot. I don't know. Okay, so creator ID comes from that thing. So we have the HTTP context .user.claims. And am I just going to have to search it? Is there an easy way to get the claim that I want? What is claims? Claims is literally just a list of claims. Okay. So let's pull this out up here. This is the ID claim. So this is a list of claims, and I want to find the claim where the type of the claim is ID. So I'll say where we have our claim dot type equals ID. Double equals ID. And we can look at whenever we create a token, because that's the claim. Oh, so lowercase ID. That's the one that I want, is lowercase ID. Like this. So basically that's going to look in the claims of that JSON web token, find the one that has the type ID. Is it key? I don't know if it's key or what is so a claim takes, yeah, so when you create a claim, it takes in the type and value. So in this case, the type is ID. Yeah, so if the ID claim is null, it shouldn't be. The ID claim should never be null because I have this authorized attribute here. But if for some reason it is, I'm going to go ahead and stop the code right here because so first your default is going to find the one that has the claim type ID. But if it didn't find it, then we're going to get null. And we need to just do like a, do I have an unauthorized? Yeah, I mean, I could use like nullish coalescing or something like that. Bad token? I don't know. So Rhetoric is saying find first value claim types dot name. Yeah, I mean, technically this could be done in a middleware, and then we just have like a user ID. I mean, that's what the middleware would have been for. The middleware would have taken this ID and then like actually looked the user up in the database using that ID. Cybertime? This is what I have. Oh, you can pass this into first or default. Is that what you're telling me? And we don't need first or default async because this is just a list. It's not actually like querying a database or anything like that. I mean, I guess you could technically asynchronously go through a list, but this list of claims is very small. It's like only like 5 at most. All right, let me catch up because people are disagreeing with what I'm doing. All right. User.find first value. Yeah, and so I don't really need to look up the user in this case. I just need to get that ID property so I can set it right here. Because here I can do ID claim dot value, and that's going to be the ID. Though I do need to cast it to an integer, which could fail. Is this how I cast? Cannot convert string to int. String dot or int dot integer, int dot parse. Yeah, so parse it as an integer. We're building a recipes API is what we're doing. From my perspective, a DTO is not a stripped model. It's an expression of a contract between services. Yeah, they're talking about like in TypeScript, they have the ability to omit a property. So you can basically define a model, but your model can also double as your DTO because of that omit. I don't know. int.parse. So yeah, we figured out int.parse. I mean, and this, we're making a lot of assumptions, right? Because the token should have been generated from here. And in this case, ID was an integer, so if we can expect that. And I guess the other thing is, like, I could just do first. If I know that we're always going to have an ID claim, then I don't really need to check if it's null. But someone could potentially send a bad token. It should. Yeah, right. Like, we're making a lot of assumptions here. Like, because the token was generated by our app and I know it has an ID claim, I shouldn't have to check if it's null, and here I shouldn't worry about it erroring out in parsing. But I'm just gonna do this. This is fine. This is fine. And let's see what we get. The first one will throw an exception. Nah. Parse returns an int. I know. So try parse throws an exception. Right? That's how databases get injected. Let's just see what this does for us. So let's run it. Yeah, tryparse returns a boolean because in tryparse you pass a pointer to a variable that it will set to have a value if it was successfully parsed it. So let's log in. It should be an int, right? Who's going to be sending? I mean, the only way they could send an invalid token to my server is if they were able to create their own tokens, which means they have access to the token secret, which means we have bigger problems. We have bigger problems than malformed payloads. They can just generate any token they wanted to. So, I mean, okay. So, got ourselves a token. Now let's try to create a recipe. Look at that. So it's using our DTO. That's awesome. So we'll just try test, test, test. And it comes back, and look at that. It has a creator ID. All right. Let's put it in the database. So we created a recipe. At this point, we can use our DB context. We'll say recipes.add this recipe that we just created. And then after we've added it, we need to save the changes. So we'll do context. Save changes async. So like add basically just adds it in memory. And what that would allow you to do is almost like what's that called in data? Like a transaction. So if you had to add multiple records and also do a bunch of other things, you'd write all of your code that does that. And then when you write save changes, that's when it actually executes it against the database. And so what this should do is insert it into the database, save the changes, and then I believe our creator attribute is actually going to be auto-populated after saving, I think. I think creator ID is fine. Creator ID is fine. Okay, let's see what happens. It didn't refresh though. Oh, I didn't save. That's why. Save the file. Should rebuild. It's a good point, Lestatique. I think for that I do want to create an exception, a catch-all exception handler. Like basically in startup, I can define a handler for any exception that is thrown in my controllers. And to me, that's a lot. I prefer that because it's very similar to how in Express you have basically a catch-all error handler. So if an exception is thrown here, it's handled in one central location. But I think I will set that up next. Though technically, I could handle it here. I don't know. I don't know what the preferred way to do it. I like to do it in one place. I know if you want to do very specific things based on the type of error, you probably should handle it in the request handler itself. But all right, let's see what happens. And Ed, thanks for the raid. Welcome, raiders. We're working on some C# today. Okay. And let's create a recipe. So we're building a recipes API with C#. We're going to log into our app to get a token. And then we're going to test out this route handler we were just working on for creating recipes. So here we go. And what's up, Aniska? Yeah, I've been doing C# at work. And then last stream, we set up this project. People have requested it for a long time, though. It's been a long time coming. I basically have been saying that I was going to do stuff, not JavaScript stuff, for a long time. So here's what we're going to do. We're going to create a grilled cheese recipe. The content is TBD. And then let's just find a nice little image of a grilled cheese. That's a good one. Right there. So that's our image URL. All right. Now, if we've done everything right, this should put it into the database. And then we'll create an update route so we can update the content. Here we go. Ta-da! I think it worked. we didn't get an error. But the way we will really know that it worked is if we do a git request on all recipes. And there it is. There's our grilled cheese. Though it's not populating the creator for some reason. Oh, wait. I was gonna say because we did JSON ignore. Why isn't it populating the creator? Dot include? So I would need to do that in the list here. Recipes dot include. I'll have to look up the syntax of that. Does this give me the recipe? Like that? Yeah, so I instantiated a recipe here, and then I thought that when after saving changes that it would just tack on the creator. How would I include the creator here? Do I just need to query it again? I don't know. But welcome, Raiders. what were you working on, Ed? Let's see if I missed some messages. Last stream you said you would have set up identity. No, I didn't set up identity. I started to look into it, and then a lot of the tutorials I found were like, you have to create an account on Azure. I know there's likely a way to do it without that, because I think the reason you're doing that is you're setting up like OAuth. But I couldn't find any like straightforward tutorials where basically just like, I have my own user store. I want to set up identity to automatically like hash passwords and stuff. It's for the future. I'll be honest, I don't have that much energy today, so I can only look at so many docs. I think like actually, ASP.NET Core or .NET 5 runs on Linux. So technically, if you could get a VPS with Linux on it, install the .NET Framework, and then run your apps. And then do it similar to Node, where the app is running in the background, but then you use Nginx to do like a proxy pass into your Node app. Yeah. Okay. So I've never used include before. What if I wanted multiple nested properties? Huh. Retrieve the creator beforehand and set the property. Yeah. And I mean, honestly, that's where our middleware would come into play, because if our middleware was already setting the user, then technically I could just do like recipe.user equals that right here. Yeah. That makes sense. Yeah. Lazy load is enabled in the entity framework by default. That makes sense. Dot then include? Can I do recipe dot include? All of this is on GitHub, so you should be able to see it, but right now this is my recipe model. Yeah. Okay, but by adding that dot include on the list, we should be able to now have the creator here. Yeah, so, well, yeah, here it is. So now that we added the include, whenever we list out recipes, it has the creator right there. Well, thank you, Gerald. Thanks for being here. And we've had some supports that I missed. Sternholm Dev, thank you for that Prime sub. And Ed, thank you for the raid again. Okay. Great. I'm just contemplating if I want to set up a legit middleware. And at this point, I think I know how I would do it. But what I'm thinking is I set up a middleware that does this piece here and then sets the user object on the context on the request. And that way here I could just do recipe.creator equals that. Yeah. Reteam it? What are you talking about, Bob? I don't know what that means. And Duckface Killer, thank you very much for that sub. Should I set up a middleware? Type 1 in the chat if I should set up a middleware that sets the user on the request. Red teaming. Oh, red teaming. You're trying to hack people legitimately. Is that what you're saying? Doable. I think I'll set up. I need to set up the middleware. db.recipes.include. Interesting. Yeah, it's a good point. Wait. You're saying this is static? If this is static, what? If there are multiple requests coming into my app from different users, how are they going to be differentiated? Right? This is per request, isn't it? Oh yeah, no, I know, Bob. I'm saying like you're doing it legitimately. Do better. That's my suggestion is make a more believable link for them to click on. Yeah. Per request. Okay, so I'm going to do my best to implement a nice little middleware here. I think we already got going. Let's call this the can I call this like set user middleware? Like this. What's up, Katoli? Thanks for being here. Frightened Panda says, I'm doing everything right. Me or Bob? Oh, I know. There's like context items. We're going to figure it out. So when this middleware is invoked, we basically need to do what we were doing over here to get the ID claim. And we just say context .user.claims, find the first, and I think in this case we'll do first or default. And then we'll say if ID claim is not null, then we're going to look the user up. And we need the database context. So we're going to dependency inject it, just like we did this. I believe we can do this. Yeah, you saw me do the double equals. That's my JavaScript brain. How would ID ever be null? Like I said, it's very unlikely that it could. Hey, Acid Spark. Hopefully work is going okay. Oh, that's a good point. Good point, Brooklyn. And I'm okay with that. Yeah, it's a good point. So for requests that don't require authorization, like the recipes list endpoint, the ID claim would be null. Yeah. Okay. And in... Well, that's unfortunate. I'm going to call this DB context, just to be clear, because there's technically the context, and then there's the DB context. Okay. Let me take a quick stretch. Have a per request class that gets injected via dependency injection. Really? I mean, this is how we do it in Express, though. We basically have a middleware that sets the user on the request if they exist. Oh, you're saying context.user? Well, I don't know about that, because I saw earlier when we were debugging context.user had a value. We'll just be really safe. Oh, we need to pull in recipe app.data. Like this. It's a good point, Fuzzy Life. But in the context of like authentication, this is typically what is done, where if there is a token on the request, the user object is looked up in the database. Like it's not necessarily it's not always done, and especially like if you're using tokens, that's one of the benefits is that you don't have to look them up in the database. But I'm gonna do it, and I have worked in a lot of apps that do this. What am I missing? That. I get what you're saying though, because this happens on every single request. But yeah. All right, I missed some other stuff too. Let me catch up. Nice and welcome, Embry. Yeah, I could use that null coalescing, or that's a like optional chaining thing. Cool. We're gonna do this. Let it be known that this happens on every request. Warning. We'll put the warning in there. So this should look up the user, and then how do we put it onto the request itself? Oh, I mean, I think you're onto something, less static. Like the entity framework caches the first lookup, and then potentially will pull it in from memory if it knows it hasn't changed. But I don't know. Now, how do I get make the user available? Because we saw an article earlier I was looking at where they did this context.items, and then they put it on items. What is items? Items is a dictionary of object. Find async. Oh well, I want, so if you do find async, that'll return an array. I want it to return just a user. That's why I'm using first or default. Yeah, that's how I'm understanding it, Pranjal. Is context is similar to like the request and the response that you get in like a node middleware. Whereas, yeah, and you have next here. That's similar to what you have like in node middleware. Is there a better way to make this user available? Make a user class that is injected per request and inject it here to set and wherever you need it. So what you're saying is, like in the controller, we can actually have the user injected like right here. Because I like that. That way, it's almost like you could just specify it where you need it, and then it's not on every single request. But I guess if I put it in the constructor of the controller, are you telling me that .NET creates an instance of the controller for every request? But yeah, I could put it here, and then that would have access to the HTTP context. Huh. I like that better. I do like that better. Because basically for this specific controller, it needs access to the user. And so I declare a dependency on it, and then that logic gets handled in there rather than a middleware. But the logic is similar to this, right? It's just that it's not on every single request. Yeah, but we're not getting them from the post request. Basically, the user's ID is in the token that's in the request, and we need to get that user so that way we can set it here. But let me see if I follow you, Fuzzy Life. So you were saying make a user class that is injected per request and inject it here to set and wherever you need it. So this is going to be a custom user class, right? This is not the user model and not the user DTO. This is we can't we can't request it here because I'm using JSON Web Tokens, and we are using we don't have anything set up that sets the user. That's potentially what I was setting up right here to set the user based on the incoming request, because I know the incoming request has their ID, but people are telling me this is too much because this happens on every single request. Recipe user. I like it. I mean, the other thing is we could reuse that in the recipe DTO for what we're sending back. Where do I even put this, though? This isn't a model. This isn't a DTO. Like if I already, so let's, I mean, I already have the user class, right? So, I mean, if I tried to dependency inject this, how would it know where to get that user from? Yeah. From startup. So in startup, I define what should be injected whenever someone requests a user. Something like this. It will just be there. Okay, let's set it up. I realize a lot of people like to use like underscore or lowercase name for these properties, and these properties probably should be protected rather than public. It's fine. So now what you're telling me, yeah, we're down a path here. So this works. This technically works. However, the recipe we're responding with doesn't have the creator property populated. And so what we decided was we actually do want the user in this request so that I can populate the creator rather than having to look, because technically I could just look them up in the database right here and set the property. But the proper way to do it would be to get the actual user that you're logged in with, which technically this would work, but we're saying this is too much work because it happens on every request. All right, where do I set that up? And what do I need to look into to set this up? Because I think I remember last time somebody was trying to, is it like configure? And like I configure what happens with the user. And then what does configure accept? Oh, no, that's... Now, basically, I want to register some class that does this whenever a user is attempted to be dependency injected. Services.addTransient. Do that here. And then what's the other overload? And then this is where we provide the user service provider. Yeah, I do need a scoped transient. Filters? I haven't tried filters. Dependency injection. So we want add scoped because it's for every request. And then what does this accept? A function. We need to pass something in here. Interface and implementation. user implementation class. This is not fine though because I need to tell it what code will look up that user, which is this. Like I need to grab the ID from the claims. Lambda that retrieves the user. Is that what I can specify right there? So just like a plain old little lambda that returns a user. So this is the service. Make a user service which implements iUser service. This service should be responsible for querying the user table. Register your service in a startup class. Then you can inject the service. But how do I tell it to use this ID right here? That's what I need help with right now, because the ID isn't just available in the request. Like, you have to get it from the claims that are on the token. Yeah. I appreciate all of your help, but I'm just gonna ignore all of you. I'm just gonna use this middleware because this middleware is fine, and this is how I would do it in Express. So it's fine. So the way I have it set up is I have this set user middleware that sets the user based on the claim in the JSON Web Token. And then I don't need to dependency inject it over here. And here I should be able to do context dot items dot get the value for user. Try get value. Why is this complaining? It is a dictionary. I mean, I know I can use bracket notation like this, but now this is technically the user, and then I can cast it to a user object like that. Like that. That's it. Oh, try get value needs an out param. Oh, okay. So I would say something like this. I would say user. Let me kill this. Keeps trying to restart. So I'd say user. Define it like this, and then try get value for user out to user. Yeah, but how would I do an out and cast it? What I need to do user object out user user. And that automatically casts it? No. Like that. Like that? Get rid of... yeah, and yeah, you're totally right. Like, basically, this possibly doesn't set the user. Out var user, and then I can just use you. But this is it's an object. I need it to be a user type. See, it needs to be a user type so that way I can use it right here. I mean, I could technically cast it here, and I guess here. I don't want to do that. Out user user? Oh, well. As user. Okay. That doesn't work. You telling me I need a block? What is going to be in the block? I like that, Brooklyn Dev. So if I want to do an extension method, then I would define a class somewhere that has a get user method on it. But that class, I wouldn't define it, but I basically would be using the HTTP context class, right? Yeah. Well, here's the thing. All of you are wrong until you can beat this, because this is what I need. So I need to, it comes out as an object, right? It's because items is a dictionary of object. So I get it back as an object, and then I need to cast it to a user. Really the only thing I need help with is getting it out and casting it all in one go. So I could do, like, this doesn't work. Yeah. And that doesn't work either. So beat this. Can you beat this syntax? First of all, let's just see if this works. Oh, put parentheses? I'm done. Again, I'm done. We're just gonna do this. What's wrong with this? This is fine. This is this is totally fine. Yeah. You all tried. Good, great work, everyone. Okay, but now we need to test this, because basically what we've now done is I have set up this middleware that's going to set the user on the incoming request, which it does here. If the token is set on the request, it's going to add this user attribute to the context items. We get that out over here. We cast it, and we're good to go. And in this case, like, this has the authorized attribute. If they were authorized, our token should have been validated, and we should have been able to get the user object from it. I mean, I guess I can try that. So out parentheses user parentheses. This is fine. Let's see if it works. It's good to hear, Norchess. You work in C# every day? All right, we have a compilation error. Cannot resolve scope service. Yeah, that makes sense. That needs to go away. I thought I got rid of that. Or not. Oh. So my middleware is attempting to use the recipes context. I believe that's where this is erroring out. But it doesn't have access to it because that database context is added here. Which happens first, configure or configure services? Okay, but I think that's the error I'm getting, right? Fuzzy Life is telling me we don't have access to the database here. It's fine. I mean, I don't need it to be dependency injected. I can just create an instance on the fly. That's good to hear, Lapsa. At least, I know some people are getting annoyed, but if you find it funny, that's great. That's great. Oh, that makes sense. Thank you, Brooklyn Dev. This gets injected into the invoke. Like that. And then we don't even need a, don't even need that. Then we can just do this. Oh, it's static? don't know. It compiled. Milos, thanks for that resub. We're having a whole lot of fun here. We'll be going back to JavaScript. Yeah. For this very reason that for a lot of things I don't know what I'm doing, and there are a lot of opinionated people here, I'll probably go back to JavaScript. I mean, I know I will go back to JavaScript in the meantime. Eventually, when I have enough time to research this stuff and like do it right and like learn about dependency injection and stuff like that, I will come back to C#. Because I don't want to. Here's something that I am cautious of, right? I realize that a lot of people watch me and a lot of people look at my GitHub. So if I put this code out there, there are going to be beginners that take this repo as an example. And if I'm doing things that are not good practice, that could like introduce some really weird security stuff, I don't want that code out there. Because, yeah, that's how we get security vulnerabilities in the world. So I want to do my best. I want to do my best to make sure that I'm at least doing it right. Now, what I've done here, this isn't this isn't bad security. This is just potentially bad performance. And I'm okay with bad performance. That's okay. The bad performance piece of this is that we're looking up the database on every single request. And that's okay with me. That is okay. It's not like we're bypassing security or anything like that. Let's see if it works, though. Let's see if it works. And then the other piece of it is I probably shouldn't be implementing my auth stuff from scratch. I should be using identity, which has a lot of good best practices built into it. I don't know. But I will go back to JavaScript pretty soon. And Frightened Panda, thank you for those gifts. Very much appreciated. And no worries, yeah. And I wouldn't even call them backseat programmers because I'm asking for help. It's just very hard to get help in the Twitch chat. And I really and that's not on you all. You all are trying your best, and I appreciate it. I thank you. I thank you for the help and the suggestions. I just don't know what to do with them. But now, all of that to say, it should work. It should work. Let's try it out. I've tried Go I think once for a code kata, but that was about it. I haven't written a lot of stuff with it. Here we go. All right, we're gonna make a recipe for avocado toast. Content TBD, and we need some avocado toast image. This is the one. Yeah, so nice. I mean, it's almost like guacamole toast, but go. And this, my friends, is what all of that trouble was for. I wanted to be able to get the creator object in the response, and we've done it. So basically, all that stuff that I did. So we have this middleware that for each request that comes into the app, if the user is logged in, we set the user object on the context, and then over here we can access that user object, which in turn allows us to put it on the recipe that we're creating, which in turn allows us to send it back in the response. Since I use Authorized, I could get the username claim from the token by just using all that stuff, pulling it out. Oh, we already did that before. Basically what I had before was this piece, which pulls out the user ID, and then we just were able to set that on creator, and that worked. But we didn't have the actual creator object, and we would have had to done a second query for it. And so we did all of what we just did, so that way I wouldn't have to query it separately. I could just use the user object. I don't know. I know I missed a bunch of messages while I was talking. Let me see if I could. Let me catch up. What type is items? Items is a dictionary of object. Yeah. Yeah. I'm okay with casting after. I mean, it's 2 lines of code. We could do it in 1, but 2 lines is fine. This looks okay to me. And Milos, thanks for that sub. I think I missed some other support events. Yeah, I read that message. But yeah, thank you. What does dependency injection mean? Basically, what it means is you declare your dependencies. Like, I declare I would like a recipes context. So I've defined this controller, and I have declared, hey, I need a recipes context. And then when the app spins up, it sees that I need this context, and it automatically injects an instance for me. And the way it's able to do that is in startup, I tell it that, hey, whenever somebody asks for a recipe context, this is what you should give them. So that's dependency injection. You declare your dependencies, and then the runtime automatically injects them when they're needed. I mean, and if you think about it, the way to actually do this without dependency injection is I would have to create an instance of a recipes controller, create an instance of the context, create an instance of a context, and then pass that into the creation of an instance of a recipes controller, which is actually what does happen behind the scenes, but I don't have to manually create the instances myself. I just tell it how to do it, and it does it automatically. User service, get user. This is fine. Yeah, I mean, I understand, like, basically this line of code here would be our user service. The tricky piece is getting the ID claim to do the lookup, right? Oh, how did I add Swagger? It's all automatic. We did do some more configuration to get the JSON Web Token into the documentation, because you can see in our Swagger docs, we can click this little icon in it, and we can set our JSON Web Token. I did have to set that up with this, but other than that, and this, like our token validation, but other than that, it's pretty automatic. And then anytime I add new routes or new controllers, they automatically get picked up and listed here. Yeah, well, thank you, Leak Geek. I appreciate it. Yeah. That's a good point, Henrik. GitHub Copilot might use this as well. Yeah, so like I'm putting this code on GitHub, some newbie comes along and they just start using Copilot to generate auth stuff. It could use my code as a suggestion. Is doing C# considered good practice anyway? C# is a very enterprisey. I guess I can say that it's an enterprisey language. It's like large companies that use a lot of Microsoft stuff typically have C# developers and are building C# stuff. So it's very widely used. I guess you could say it's a good practice to use it because a lot of people use it. I don't know. Oh, no, Fuzzy Live. You're perfectly fine. I really do appreciate your suggestions. Yeah. And I might have already commented on that earlier. What if you host... Oh, yeah, you're totally right. I shouldn't allow external URLs here. Let's list our recipes. Right now, we have a grilled cheese recipe and an avocado toast recipe. Technically, I should like have a whitelist of URLs where a whitelist of domains where these image URLs come from. But this is fine. I'm not actually going to deploy this thing. It's just running on my computer. A nil error? I'm not sure what that is. Yeah. You're saying put it in here as base 64? This is fine. This is fine. Yeah. Hey, no worries, Denolium. Enjoy your food. Yeah. Oh, yeah, why am I just looking it up directly? Because we'll maybe refactor this in the future. Because we did talk about that. We could create basically a class that handles all of this lookup. Like I could have a method that's get user by ID and call that instead of directly using the DP context. But I don't know. Is C# and .NET still relevant in 2021? I would say it's even more relevant now that it's like fully cross-platform. Like you can run .NET on a Linux server legitimately and support it and have Microsoft support for it. So yeah. I was saying you could do a whitelist if we are going to be accepting image URLs. Because somebody could post these images like on a malicious server and like harvest IP addresses or something like that. Yeah, I'm not going to update it. This is fine. It works well enough. Yeah, you can pretty much use any database with or key value store with .NET. And there's probably a lot of libraries that exist. If you check out NuGet. So NuGet is like the NPM of the .NET C# world. And if we just search for Redis, I'm sure we'll find an adapter. Yeah, there's a caching extension. There's probably I was going to say there might be an entity framework for Redis, but I don't think so because Redis is a key value store and it's not really SQL. But there are definitely ways to interact with the Redis database. Yeah. Cool. We don't have a front end right now. Right now we're just making a backend API. You technically could use like Blazor, which is like a server-side rendered, but also can do like a single page application thing. But we're not doing any of that. Right now it's just a JSON API. Cool. Let's update a recipe. So we can create recipes. Great. Now let's create an endpoint where we can update a recipe given its ID. It should be pretty easy. I say that, but here we go. So this is going to be a post request to /ID. I have to figure out, how do I do, is it like this? I think it's like this. Call this update. So this is saying when I get a post request to recipes /ID, we're going to update that specific ID. I don't need the slash. Okay. But we also need to specify that we get the ID. And this is, this one's from the body. And the ID is should be in the URL. We're not going to do any of that just yet. Let's make sure that this route usually works. Oh, I can make it an int. That's nice. Oh, this is a put. Yeah, you're totally right. Well, yeah, it's a put. It's a put to ID because a patch would be like a partial update, and we're not going to implement that. We're just going to do a full replace. All right, let's see what we get. Okay, would you look at that? So a put request to recipes /ID accepts these three properties, and it accepts the ID here. Actually, let me let's do this just to make sure that what we're sending to the API is correct. I'm going to make an anonymous object. Like that. Okay, let's try it. So if we look at all of our recipes, let's try to update the grilled cheese recipe. So the grilled cheese recipe has an ID of 1. So we're going to make a request there to ID 1. And so when I try it out, ID here is 1, and then the content is going to be these properties. I do need an auth token, though. This is a little annoying that every time the page refreshes, I get logged out. I know there's a way to fix it. You basically can specify a custom Swagger UI page that has JavaScript that will save the token, so when the page refreshes, it keeps it. But I'm not going to worry about that for now. That password is too complicated. Okay, so we're sending a put request to recipes/1. If we did everything right, we should get back ID1 and the data that we sent. Bad request. The JSON object contains a trailing comma. Oh, you're right. When you're right, you're right. Yeah, we could use Postman. We absolutely could, but I like the Swagger docs. Cool. So it's working. So it's getting the ID and it's getting the payload that we're sending. So it's a good thing. Now what we need to do is we actually could do some authorization here. We could look up the recipe in the database. And then if its creator ID doesn't match the ID of the request, the user making the request, we don't allow the request to happen. So I'm going to do that. So the recipe will come from the recipes database. Context dot recipes. Because we get the recipe. We want where recipe dot creator we want where recipe dot ID is equal to this ID. And recipe dot creator ID is equal to user dot ID. Well, like this. So this is going to look in our database, find a recipe that has that ID and where the creator ID matches. If we don't find it, then we don't let them update it. It's been 0 minutes since CJ last did triple equals. Yeah. Yeah. I could have authorized on the controller since most of your endpoints require it, and allow anonymous for those that don't. Well, right now I just leave off authorized on ones that don't need it. So like on the recipes list, I don't have authorized on there, which in my case just works because I'm not actually using identity. I just have a custom token validator thingy that's happening. Yeah. We're using C#. Abul Sadi. Maybe avoid using parentheses for a single property? What do you mean? Not sure what you mean. Ooh. Can I ask why make this async since you just await it immediately and it's just one request? I would imagine that in the real world, if this is a heavily used recipe app and you're getting multiple requests for recipes, you do want to do things on background threads because otherwise multiple requests would have to wait for other requests to finish. So, oh, you're saying, why am I using parentheses here? Yeah, that's just a code preference. I prefer that in JavaScript because we have Lambda functions there too. And my preference is even if there's a single parameter, we still wrap it in parentheses. I know you don't have to, but I like it. And the code compiles. Yeah, it's basically just I'm consistent with it. You can see basically every. Well, actually, I will say in startup, I probably left it off some places because I did. Yeah, these are copy pasted, so I didn't include them here. But pretty much any lambda I write myself, I do put parentheses on it. Okay, so if the recipe is null, then it doesn't exist, or it does exist, but the creator ID is wrong. So I'll say if recipe is null, I'm just going to return a not found. I mean, technically, I could do unauthorized. Like, actually, we could do this. We could do don't check the creator ID just yet. Just check the ID. So get the recipe that has the ID that we're looking for. If it's null, it's absolutely a not found response. And I do like these anonymous objects. I kind of need to create like a message response type. So yeah, if we didn't find it, it's not found. If recipe.creatorID does not equal user.id, then this is unauthorized. Because you're trying to update a recipe that you yourself did not create. And if neither of these are the case, then we're good to go. So we can just so because we pulled this recipe from the context, we can just update it directly. So we can say recipe dot title equals the recipe request dot title. Same thing with content and image URL. So that'll set that, and then we just save the changes. Right? I don't think I need to like re-add it, because technically this recipe that got returned here is within the context repository. So after modifying the properties and saving the changes, it should be good to go. Cool. Let me catch up on chat, and then we'll test this out. Am I a coder without C? I don't know what you mean by that. I do like C#. I do like, so the only hesitation I have is it's very big. There's a lot. There's a lot of concepts, and there's a lot of things that I just don't know about to be able to do it like the easiest or the best or like the like the best practice way or the most done way that most C# developers that have been doing it for a long time would do. That's the only reason I hesitate to do too much of it. But other than that, I do like it. I like. Someone I think asked last stream if I would choose TypeScript or C#. Like I would choose C# any day, because C# has existed for a very long time, and they've figured a lot of things out. Whereas TypeScript, it's created by the same people, but TypeScript is like stuck in the JavaScript world. So there's so many things that they have to be backwards compatible with. That just results in some like really weird errors and weird code with TypeScript. So if I absolutely had to work in a statically typed language, I would choose C# over something like TypeScript, even though I use JavaScript all the time. Yeah. C# is cool. It's cool. I like it. We don't need Visual Studio to code .NET. No, you can use VS Code, which is what I'm using here. This is the free editor you can just get, and it works cross-platform. They have all the extensions you need. Like, I mean, you can see that I have all of these. I have IntelliSense, right? Like recipe dot, and then it tells me what all the properties are. It works very similarly to Visual Studio. Yeah, so I mean I don't know the exact specifics of async await in C#, but I do know that a C# process or like a .NET process will spin up multiple threads. So like when it's accepting requests for like this API is up and running and it's taking in multiple requests, it potentially will spin up 4 or 5 different background threads, each one of those handling incoming requests. Whereas with JavaScript, it is a single thread. And there are things that can happen in background threads, but that isn't like transparent to your JavaScript code. Everything, all the code you see is happening on the main thread. Even with like async await, basically when you await something, that could use some lower level thing that actually does spin up a process or a thread. But you don't really have access to that. You have access to the result when that thing is done running. And the result that you have access to is running on the main thread. So yeah, if you do and hello Lil Rex, if you do ! theme, you can get a link to all my VS Code stuff. Yeah, there it is. This one, VS Code settings. I like to return a 404 when an unauthorized user tries to update something. Yeah, this is from a security standpoint, it does make sense because you're not really revealing any information here. I think I want to be clear because, I mean, this actually happens like on GitHub. If you're ever, for some reason, not logged into GitHub and you try to go to a repo that is private, you get a 404. And sometimes you're just like, of course this exists, but then you don't realize that you're not actually logged in. So I like to differentiate the error. I don't know. I see what you're saying, though. I do see what you're saying. Yeah. You always get confused with untracked entities. I believed recipe is a tracked entity because we just looked it up. So I think we should be good here. I think we're all right. If you look at my VS Code settings, you can see all of the extensions that I use. Would I pick C# over Java? Yeah, absolutely. I have used Electron before. See you later, Hediyat. Hediyat? Fari? You're gonna go watch me do JavaScript. I mean, most all of my past videos are. So yeah. I talked a little bit about Copilot last time. I think it's cool if you know what you're doing, but it basically so there's the problem of people copying and pasting code from Stack Overflow, using it directly without any modification. That's a problem. It happens, but this makes it a whole lot easier for people to do that. It makes it more accessible to just basically copy and paste things without modification from a place like Stack Overflow or even from like a GitHub project, which could result in bad code proliferating to people that don't really know what they're doing. But I don't know. I don't know. Yeah. It's not going to replace. So, like, as it exists right now, it will not replace it will replace bad developers. If you're a bad developer, you might be worried. But if you're a good developer that knows what you're doing and writes secure code, then you don't have to worry. Yeah. Yeah, and there's quite a few issues people have brought up about it, like in terms of licensing and proliferating bad practices and stuff like that. But yeah. Okay, is this code gonna work? I think so. Should we place bets? Let me do a quick login. All right. We have a token. And we are going to attempt to update our grilled cheese. So we're going to update the recipe with ID 1. The title is grilled cheese. Let's get the current image URL. Basically this. But what we're going to change is the content. Get some bread. get some cheese, put it on fire, done. All right, so this is going to update it in the database. It's going to replace the TBD content. It looks like it worked here. And then now if we get all recipes, look at that. It has the latest content. Yeah, I am coding on a MacBook, but I have a mechanical keyboard right in front of it. And there have been some support events. Freak Zombie, thank you for that 4-month resub. Do I have plans to become a CTO? No. I have plans. I have plans. I don't know. I mean, technically my title at work has chief in it, so I am a chief, but I'm a chief developer. I like to write code. Yeah, thank you, Leo Leon. That's a great point. So right now we can see that the updated at was still whenever it was created few minutes ago. Yeah, like 10 minutes ago is when the updated at. We technically need to update it to right now. It's a good point. Like that. I think it depends, but I'm not really worried about the pay. I wanna build cool things. Yeah, I mean, I work at a small company though, so there aren't that many developers, like for me to lead, so I'm not technically a tech lead. I don't know. I have a lot of responsibilities. Yeah, I do architecture, I do database design, I do DevOps stuff, I do front-end development, I do back-end development. I'm in a lot of client meetings and estimation meetings, and I interface directly with the client. So, yeah. Bearer token is a type of authentication scheme. Basically, after we log in, we get a token. That token needs to be included in the header of every request that is authorized. Yeah. Chief, well, my actual title is Chief Full Stack Developer. Yeah. No, and I mean, I like working at a small company, which is why I haven't tried to work at any of the FANG companies. Okay, I think we're good on update. Let's do a Git route for 1. And then we need a delete route, and then we'll do a refactor, and then I will be done. So this is a Git route for one specific ID. And this returns just a single recipe. And we basically, so this here is why we do need to do some refactoring after I'm done with all this. Yeah, we actually don't even need. Oh no, this is the wrong one. This. So when you make a GET request to that ID, we look it up in the database. And then we actually have some logic like this. So if it's not found, return not found. Otherwise, we return the recipe itself that you just requested. But this is why we need to refactor, because right, I have this lookup by ID right here. I also have it right here. But what we can do is we can abstract that out into a single method, so I don't have duplicate code. Similarly, like this looking up and then deciding if it's not found or not, we can extract that out as well. Well, that should be good enough. This lets us get a single recipe by ID. And Stafford 007, thanks for that Prime sub. Much appreciated. But now we have a GET route, so we can, instead of getting a list of recipes, we can get one specific recipe. So if we throw in ID 1, we can get it back, just like that. It does not include the creator. We do want to include that, which we just do like this. And I guess technically we wanted to do that over here too. Yeah, I'm looking at my MacBook right now. Here it is. It's right here. Just me and my Mac. What would be the best practice to query from a database with 1,000 items on the search? We would implement pagination. And also, in terms of database best practices, we would want to implement some database indexes or indices so that whatever columns we're querying on, we need to make sure that those lookups are fairly fast. And Karashi-sama, welcome. Welcome to the Coding Garden. All right. We'll try it again, but this time it should include the creator info. And it does, so we get back the grilled cheese. It includes the creator info. It's a beautiful thing. We can also pass in ID 2. That's going to give us back our avocado toast. Look at that. Very nice. And then lastly, we need to be able to delete by ID. And this will also require authorization because you can only delete ones that you have created. So we'll do an HTTP delete by ID. And this just responds with like a 200 status code if it was successful. But really, we want to look it up. If it was not found, we just return not found. And then we need to do this stuff here. We'll say if recipe.creator_id is equal to user.id, or is not equal to it, then we're not going to let them delete it. We'll do something like this. Yeah, you can still have stored procedures and all kinds of stuff in Microsoft SQL. You probably can in MySQL too. But yeah, we are using Microsoft SQL Server, which is running in a Docker container right here. Find async? Someone told me that earlier. I'll add that whenever we refactor, because all of this is going to be refactored to pull out into like a repository thing. It was you? You told me that. Does that return only one though? What are our other options? Oh well, I'm gonna leave it like this because we are going to refactor all of this into reusable methods. Okay, try to find it by ID. If we didn't find it, not found. If we did find it, make sure that the currently logged in user, and we get that by making sure this is authorized. The currently logged in user has their creator ID. If they don't, it's unauthorized. And if it's good, then we need to delete it. How do we do that? Context.recipes.remove recipe, just like that. Probably do remove async. And then we just respond like that. Is it delete? Oh, it's not even async, it's just remove it, and then we save the changes. Like that. So when you're deleting something, make sure it's actually in the database. If it is, make sure that this user requesting to delete it is the creator. If they're not, it's unauthorized. And then if they are, we remove it, we save changes, and we just respond, okay. It built okay. Let's try it. I think if I try without logging in, we should get unauthorized. Yeah, so we're not logged in right now. We can't delete anything. But let's log in. I don't have a try catch here because I mentioned we would add kind of like a catch-all handler in startup. So that way, if any of our request handlers throw an error, we catch them in a single place. Okay, moment of truth. I'm gonna delete the avocado toast ID 2. So actually, let's try with something that doesn't exist. We're gonna try ID 3. We should get not found. Great. But if I do ID 2, we should get a 200 status code. Yeah, so this is a success. This deleted the recipe with ID 2. And then now if we list all recipes, we only get back 1, which is the grilled cheese. All right. We're making progress. Next up is we need to do some refactoring. So a lot of people have mentioned this. Like I'm using the context directly and directly querying the database. But what we really need is like a repository class. We need a class that has some reusable methods like find by ID, different things like that. And that way we can reuse it in multiple places. Also, we have a lot of duplicate logic around of like getting the user from the request and then comparing the ID. We could probably extract that out as well. I think before we do all of that, let's figure out how to do an exception handler, a global exception handler that catches any sort of exception. Because one thing we could do is if I kill the database, so if I shut this database down and then restart my app, whenever we make a request to one of the, like even the login route, I think it will likely throw an exception because it can't even connect to the database. Let's try it. Let's see what happens if we try. So right now the database isn't even up, so it can't connect to it. So if I try logging in, it's going to try, and eventually it'll likely time out because it can't even connect to the database. Trying. I think there's like a 10-second default timeout or something like that. Yeah, internal server error. So this is a serious exception or exception. It couldn't connect to the database. I don't think that crashed the app though. Like technically we could still try to hit some of these other routes, I think. But there are certain scenarios, yeah, so like this is still gonna work. There are certain scenarios though where an exception might actually bring down our entire server, and that's definitely what we want to stop from happening. So if an exception happens, we'll respond with a nice message, but it won't shut down our server. But yeah, some SQL error happened. I mean, that's kind of how I feel, Citro, is like, Entity Framework is already an abstraction, but there is some duplication we can get rid of. Like this piece here, we do multiple times. But I mean, at the end of the day, is it really that much duplication? Because we're kind of just using the library as it is. I don't know. But yeah, so our like repository would be like a service class that has some methods on it. Okay, let's figure out how to handle exceptions. Handling errors in ASP.NET Core. Yeah, so we are using the developer exception page. That's fine. Use exception handler. Yeah, and then that's a good point, SQL Gordster. Like the reason we would do it is to make the code easier to modify and update later on. Yeah. This might be what I want. Oh, thank you. Moralities. Much appreciated. Access the exception. Exception handler lambda. I think this is kind of what I wanted. Yeah, this is actually what I want. Let's see if I can get it going. So use an exception handler. I don't want to do all this silly stuff. Wait, does their example have 2 semicolons in it? It does. Look at that. I mean, I could do this. This is going to give us a 500 status code. I don't think I'm going to do write async or anything like that. Yeah, I don't need to do any of this. I think all I need to do is context.response dot body writer. I know I can do like a JSON. I can just do like write JSON. Take a look at what was shared here. Oh, this is the page that I was on, isn't it? .NET Core write JSON response. What do I think about it so far? It's pretty cool. I like it. I guess it is just write async, and then I need to throw a JSON object in there. Where's this come from? Microsoft.ASP.NET Core.HTTP. Some parentheses on it. And we'll await this. Frankie 2, thank you for those 5 gifted. Much appreciated. What is this? Can anyone confirm that that's a legit URL? Yeah, I stream every Friday. That's pretty much the schedule right now. Is I stream every Friday. How do I get access to the actual error that was thrown? Didn't I have that? Yeah, it is Friday. You're right. What was the code that I copied earlier? I can't even... This was it. This was it. Okay. Let's see where they got the error message. No, I want the actual exception that was thrown. Context.error? I'm gonna search the web again. .NET Core exception handler JSON response with error. Feature.error? Where's feature come from? This thing? I just want the general exception. I don't want to cast it to something specific. Is there a way to avoid scripts flooding the create user endpoint? Right now, no. But you could set up like rate limiting or different things like that, because basically, yeah, you're totally right. Right now, there is this route, the create user endpoint, and people could just flood this and create a bunch of different random users. One way would be to do like phone number validation or email validation to prevent just a whole bunch of different users, because right now we are just using usernames. We don't have any like specific identifiable information. The other thing is to limit requests by IP address. And the other thing is to disable user creation altogether. Because this is a recipes app. Like, we haven't really even defined, is it user submitted recipes? Is it just for one user? But yeah, there's a lot that you would need to take into account. Leave it the way it is. Okay, I can do that, but this exception handler path feature sounds specific. Because really what I want to do is this. Oh, and actually I haven't showed you how to do like parameterized strings in C#, I don't think. But like, for example, well, actually, no, that's not, I don't know if that's going to work, because I actually do need to include curly braces. It's not going to work. All right, so I'm creating a JSON object that has a message property, and that message property is going to be this thing, .error .message, like this. So this is going to respond with a JSON object that has a message property that is the actual message from the exception. Can I do that? Doubles? Oh, I like it. Okay. And then these get a single like that, and that gets a double. Cool. I mean, I guess technically I probably need to set the content type. I just know that there's a somewhat easier way, because I set this up in the app that I'm working on at work, and it wasn't this involved. It was actually pretty automatic. Cool. So the content type is JSON, and then it just has the exception message inside of it. Should be fine. All right, let's see if it compiles. It compiles, and right now our database is down. Our database is not running. So we should get a nice response instead of that just big old stack trace. So now when this times out, we should get back an object that has a message property with the actual error message inside of it. No such thing as an easy way. Sometimes there's an easy way. Yeah. Look at that. It sort of worked, but we forgot to include the double quotes. We forgot to include the double quotes on the message, because we are like making a JSON object manually. We could use like a serializer, but technically this needs to be wrapped in double quotes. Can I escape it like that? Yeah. All right, let's try again. Building, done building. Let's try here. Oh, wait, yeah, and then message needs to be wrapped in double quotes because it's... Okay, here's the thing. Don't write your JSON by hand. kids at home. use an actual serializer, because technically we could create like a custom error response object and then use the serializer to automatically turn that into JSON instead of trying to make a JSON string here. Yeah. I think that's the last thing we need though. Yeah, I mean, I technically should have brought in Newtonsoft JSON, because I know they have a lot of easy, cool things like JSON convert.serialize. Maybe I'll just do that. That'll be fun to show. But this is going to work. Hello, Voice of Grog. Would I prefer C# over Node Express for this sort of things? I'm starting to lean that way, especially for like larger projects. Just because the code is very self-documenting. Whereas like, I mean, JavaScript makes it really, it's really fast and easy and dynamic, but when you start doing the kind of dynamic things we do in JavaScript in a very large code base, it can get hard to follow. But yeah, but look, we did it. So now when an error happens, we don't just see a big old stack trace. We see an actual JSON response with a 500 status code that has the actual error message that happened. Yeah, we can try it with system.text.json. I think they have... I know that it's gotten better, like the built-in one. Do we have a JSON serializer? .serialize? And then I just pass in an object? Maybe? So if I do something like this, like message equals that. Oh, okay. So now I could do something like JSON response equals that, and then I don't have to do all this weird escaping. It should just handle it for me. So it should take this little anonymous object and turn it into a JSON string for me. This is better. I like this a whole lot better. So it compiled. Let's try it one more time. Oh yeah, this is it. Nocturnal. This is giving us the exception, I believe. And we just implemented the JSON serialization, so we didn't have to do it from scratch or by hand. There we go. Look at it. It's a beautiful thing. Can there be multiple exceptions? Yeah, there technically could be like an inner exception. And sometimes you'll get that, like the actual exception says, see inner exception for details. We're not handling that, but this should be good enough for now. Like if a top level error happens, this is going to capture it, respond with a 500 status code and the actual message. Yeah, and we technically do see the output of that exception here for like debugging. We could go look at the logs and figure it out. I'm not going to show unit testing today. But I think we're gonna continue working on C# stuff in the future, because I think I'm done streaming for today, because I've been live for almost 3 hours. I have to get back to work. But next time we will refactor. Next time we'll take this controller, which technically works. We technically have create, read, update, delete with authentication. We can get all recipes, we can create recipes, we can get a single recipe, we can update a recipe, we can delete a recipe. We can do it, but we can make the code better. So next time on Coding Garden, we will refactor this. Basically, we'll create a service that encapsulates the functions that talk to the database. Instead of having to call these functions directly here, we'll pull those out. Oh, thank you, Nocturnal. I'll leave herself like a to-do and a note. We can look at that. Where? Right here. To-do. Server.get last exception. Something like that. But also, we're going to refactor this. So we're going to pull it into a service. I think the other thing is we can look into how to potentially get the user object dependency injected rather than doing this manually or rather than having this middleware. So we'll say to do, figure out a way that doesn't do this on every request. Like that. And Alchemist, thanks for that sub. Yeah. It's good to hear a wild boop. C# is pretty cool. It's just there's a lot. It's a very big ecosystem. There's a ton of stuff. So there is a lot to learn. I think can I get anybody here that does C# on a daily basis on a scale of 1 to 10? How am I doing? 10 being this is the best C# you've ever seen. 1 being this is the worst C# you've ever seen. Give me a rating. And we'll try to get better. I'll try to get better next time. Yeah, 7. Oh, thank you. Really? Wow. Okay. A 6? Well, thank you, Shorcy Web. Cool. Here's the thing. How often do you see, like, if we're going by that same rating scale, like a 2, how often do you see like a 2 in production code? Pretty often. So I think I'm doing all right. I'm doing my best. Yeah. So we're gonna make it better next time. We're gonna keep doing C# here. Next Friday, I'll go live. We'll basically refactor this, try to make it a little bit better. Also, in the meantime, feel free to comment on the GitHub repo. I'm gonna push up today's code here. But if you do have other comments for things that we could improve, feel free to open up an issue. We're talking both .NET 5 and C#? Yeah. Yeah. Cool. I appreciate you all. Thanks for hanging out with me. Even the people that like know this stuff, because usually, I guess usually the people that hang out don't necessarily know a lot of JavaScript. They do other things, but they watch my stream to like learn about JavaScript. And now you're watching me kind of like struggle through all of this. But yeah, cool. I'll push this code up. I think I can just push it right now. I don't think I have anything special. Should be fine. Cool. Oh, yeah, you're right, WPW. Like, the .NET Framework is, like, all-encompassing, and then the C# language you can use within it. But we are using, like, a lot of .NET packages for all this stuff. Naru says, I struggle, but your struggle gives me hope. Nice. This could be like a fun series, though. Like, once we get this nice and working, try to do it again with like Python, like Alex is mentioning, or we could do Go, that kind of thing. The thing is, like, eventually, once I have enough time, I would like to do my own research off stream because, like, these past 2 streams are really like I'm kind of going into it fairly unprepared. Really, all I know about it is what I've used at work. And like, I didn't set it up from scratch at work. I'm just working in an existing project and like following the patterns that they're doing. But if I had time to research this stuff, I could potentially put on a better show or like do things right first. But I don't know. Cool. All right. You all are awesome. We're going to do a raid. Yeah. Riddlerman says, I really appreciate you doing this. I'm on a team where we use .NET in our project, and it's nice seeing similar issues. Nice. Good to hear it. Do we have any other supports? No, I think that was it. Yeah. Thanks again, Alchemist, for that sub. And Frankie, too. Did I miss that earlier? I appreciate the gifts. Thank you very much. And Stafford with that resub. Cool. Yeah. And like I mentioned, the code is here if you do want to see it. I just pushed up the latest. And like I said, feel free to open an issue if you feel like there's something I should be doing better. Cool. All right, we're going to raid. I don't know where we're going to go, but wherever we go, Show them lots of love. Drop a follow if you like what they're doing, all that good stuff. You can see the raid messages here. If you're a sub, that's your raid message. And if you're not a sub, you can use this one. Yeah, Sightseer says, I have an issue with the entire repo. It's not JavaScript. And you can see those raid messages there if you want to click to copy and paste. Alrighty. Again, I appreciate you. Thanks for hanging out with me on this Friday. And we'll see you next Friday. And maybe before that. There might be an earlier stream before that where we continue working on this app. Cool. Wherever you are in the world, have a wonderful morning, afternoon, evening, or night. And until next time, here's this.